This is going to be a tutorial for Runway Agent and Secret Agent. I'll be covering technical details starting with Agent 24, going all the way up to Secret Agent 22. I decided to do it this way for a couple of reasons. Firstly, several different times on Runway represent extremely common milestone times. Agent 24 is often recommended as a very good time for beginners to aim for to work on their OCB. Secret Agent 23 is probably the #1 most common time players go for to achieve their first points. Secret Agent 22 is the most common world record on the ranks. The second reason is that each stage builds naturally from the one before. There are no vast leaps at any point along the continuum in terms of tech knowledge. Execution will obviously be much higher for Secret Agent 22 than Agent 24, but that's just something that will come with experience. It's my aim to give you all the tools you need. Your contribution will be putting in the time. A quick disclaimer is that while this claims to be a beginner to expert guide, it does not include Agent 21, which in my opinion goes far beyond the expert category. A quick note, if you just want to use this tutorial for any one of the times mentioned without going all the way up to world record, that's completely fine. Each player is different. Some players may just want to get Secret Agent 23 for first points, and then move on from the level entirely. Some may want to get 1 or 2 times on this list, play other levels, then come back. Others may feel motivated to go for world record. Part of the beauty of GoldenEye is your limitless number of options with regards to how you choose to move through the levels. Do what you enjoy and what motivates you. To start with, we'll be focusing on Agent 24 with no self boosts. This is easy enough that any player should be able to get it, and it will lay the foundations for all the other times that we'll get to later. You can use 1.2 or 2.x for this. 1.2 will almost invariably be easier for new players to pick up. However, 2.x will become necessary for some of the harder times, so it is an option to familiarize yourself with it now. If you're in 1.2, you want to skip both cutscenes immediately. If you're using 2.x, you want to watch the first cutscene to build speed with 2.x. Skip it when the text disappears. You then want to skip the second cutscene immediately. The reason we always cut the second cinema is because Bond steps forwards in the cutscene, and this means you will miss picking up the box of grenades on your way to the slide. Once you gain control of Bond, you want to immediately set your line to the slide. You can switch to nades as you pop up onto the conveyor belt. This causes a small lag spike which can help avoid getting stuck on this corner. The slide is one of the easiest places to lose time without realizing. It may look like the banked sides would be something Bond could run up in the same way he can run up many inclines. However, this is actually a visual illusion. They are in fact programmed such that they cannot be stood on. As a result, the banked sides of the slide are effectively surrounded by invisible walls, and the only traversable part of the slide is the slide bed itself. Bumping or snagging on these invisible walls will lose time, so be aware of this when getting on the slide. Once at the bottom of the slide, you want to set your line to the left of the door of the hut and open the door through the wall. The slide plus the 3 turns inside this hut are an enormous part of what will ultimately decide your time. We'll go into this in more depth later, but for the moment focus on trying to cut a tight line to the key and back out again without bumping on anything. While in the hut, you also want to throw a nade to kill these 2 guards. If you don't, they'll run outside and start shooting at you. And since you're taking an almost direct line to the plane, this means that in the process of shooting at you, they'll be shooting at and hitting the plane, which can often blow up, leading to a failed run. Once outside, set a good line to this corner. Then once there, set a good line to this corner. At this point in the run, you can start using look down if you're comfortable. If you set a good line to this corner, you should be on a pretty good line to the plane without needing to make any major adjustments. The activation radius for the plane is a circle, so you want to be heading for the back side of the wing to get inside the circle as quickly as possible. You will always get this drone boost, which is enough for 24. However, if you're lucky, you'll also receive a guard boost. When near the plane, start mashing B so you can enter the plane at the earliest possible moment. If everything went well, this should be good enough for 24. For Agent 23, the biggest difference is that we will be using nade boosts on the runway. The start of the run is the same as 24 up to the point of leaving the hut. Upon leaving the hut, you want to start priming a nade by holding Z. Correctly timing the release of the nades takes some practice and experience, and different players use different methods. I know one player who says a set phrase out loud to time the release. I know another player who sets up a metronome running in the background. I personally count beats in the music. Some players do it with their own head count. Plenty of players use visual cues on the ground. However, a lot of players also just do it by feel. Do whatever works for you. As soon as you get the boost from a nade, you want to immediately start priming the next one, at the very least while the health bar is still on screen. You want to get 3 nade boosts down the runway in total, plus a drone boost at the end. If you find you're not getting the drone boost, it's because you're getting the last boost too late, and it is taking place when the drone would hit you. It probably means you're not being quick enough priming your nades. So make sure you're priming each nade as quick as you can after you've got the previous boost, and make sure you start priming the first nade as soon as you leave the hut. One other subtle but worthwhile thing to implement will be priming the guard kill nade. If you do a normal throw for this nade, the lag spike from the explosion tends to coincide with your first boost nade hitting the floor, which can cause it to clip through the floor. To avoid this, you can prime the guard kill nade so it blows up earlier and doesn't interfere with your first boost nade. For Secret Agent 23, we'll be adding in 2 more tricks, the hut boost and the battery throw. Both of these tricks can seem intimidating, but don't put too much pressure on yourself to get them straight away. Sometimes it can be a case of practicing each day and getting 5% better each day. On the first day it feels completely impossible, but after a week or 2 you start getting a foothold and can climb from there. The main differences for Secret Agent 23 is we'll be performing 1 fewer boost on the runway because we'll be doing the battery throw. However, we will be adding in an extra boost at the hut to compensate for this. First, the hut boost. There are 2 ways to do the hut boost. There's the old method, which is easier to pick up and play but less consistent, and the new method, which is harder to master but more consistent. I'll go over both and you can choose which one is right for you. The corner strat is the more intuitive of the 2. You start as usual, pick up the nades immediately and switch to nades while hopping up onto the conveyor belt. However, for this strat you want to start priming a nade about halfway down the slide. You then have a couple of options with regards to when to release. You can either release early, or you can hold onto the nade a little bit longer and release closer to the wall. You then go into the hut, throw the guard kill nade, pick up the key and exit as normal, and if your nade position was good and you were fast enough, you should get a boost to the corner of the hut. This strat is easier to pick up. However, it has the disadvantage of unreliable nade placement. Ideally the nade will end up somewhere near the middle of the door, so you can just run over it and get the boost. However, it's also possible the nade ends up nestling in the corner, giving you a suboptimal boost, or at worst, no boost at all. The harder but reliable alternative is to use the look down strat. You prime the nade halfway down the slide again. However, this time you want to go into full look down, turn onto your normal line to the left of the door, and release the nade as soon as you're on the line, before you hit the ground. If done correctly, this will mean the nade slides along the ground to the left of the door, meaning it will give you a good boost every time. However, the look down obviously has the tendency to throw off your line to the door, so this does take patience and practice. It's worth noting that this strategy is the meta for 22 on Agent and Secret Agent, so if you're planning to go for those, it may behoove you to learn it now, or you may decide to go for the easier strat now and pick up look down later. As soon as you've thrown the hut boost nade, you want to be priming the guard kill nade to avoid the nade clipping issue mentioned earlier. One thing you can do is hold Z for the hut nade, then press A while holding Z to release the nade. This has the effect of releasing the first nade and then instantly priming the next one. However, releasing Z and re-holding it again will also work fine. For the battery throw, we'll be learning the JL throw, as the old turning throw has effectively been rendered obsolete. On a good run, hopefully you'll have got good hut boosts and 2 good boosts down the runway. After the third boost, you want to go into planar view and make sure you're heading to the backside of the wing as normal. However, as soon as you hear the drone firing, you want to start holding Z to prime a nade, then turn onto the throw line. On widescreen, you want to turn so there's a gap between the side of your screen and the tail of the plane. The lineup is pretty lenient. A small gap will work, as will a bigger gap. I don't personally use full, but from the runs I've seen, lining up the edge of the screen with the tail of the plane seems to be the equivalent lineup. You want to line up your screen as quickly as possible, then go into full lookup. Crucially, once you're in lookup, you do not let go of the stick. You want to continue holding the stick, up for upright, down for reverse players. This results in Bond throwing the nade slightly behind him, which is essential for the battery throw. You continue holding Z until you're hit by the drone. The hit from the drone will cause Bond to release the nade, and if you did everything correctly, should have a good chance of blowing up the battery. As soon as you release the nade, you want to get out of lookup and set your line to the point where the back side of the wing meets the body of the plane. Mash B as usual, and if you did everything right, hopefully it should be good enough for 23. As mentioned, if going for Agent 22, you will want to implement the look down hut nade strat, so follow the instructions given in the section previous. Also, if you're not already using 2.x, this is the point where it becomes essential. The main thing to note about Agent 22 is it will be implementing both the hut boost and the 3 boosts down the runway, since we don't need the battery throw. With the guaranteed drone boost, this gives us a 5-nil boost ratio. At this point in the grind, I would strongly recommend purchasing an Everdrive or knockoff equivalent and using the Runway splits from. It's extremely easy to lose time in the hut or on the slide without knowing where or how to diagnose it, which can be very damaging to morale. The important splits on the ROM are the first 5: top of ramp, key approach, key leave, past hut, and corner. Top of ramp is pretty self-explanatory. It's the split from taking control of Bond to getting to the seam of the ramp. The first thing for a good top of ramp split is to be holding down and left on the stick before and as you gain control of Bond. This ensures you are turning and getting into look down instantly. This takes a bit of getting used to, but comes with practice. Note that you don't necessarily have to be holding exactly diagonally. Depending on your preference and your controller sensitivity, you'll need to play around a bit to figure out what gives you the best results. Apart from setting this first line well, the biggest factor in getting a good split is avoiding bumping on the corner, rubbing the walls, or snagging on the sides as you enter the slide. An optimal top of ramp split is about 1.53. Key approach is the split from the top of the ramp to getting past this wall in the hut. It basically tells you how much you ground on the side of the slide, how good your line to the door was, how quick your door entry was, and how tight your turn was through the door. The first way to lose time here is by turning too early and grinding on the left side of the slide, though turning too late can also lose time. You'll need to experiment to learn the earliest point you can turn without hitting the left side. A good cue is the third railing. Setting a good line to the door is also important, especially now we're using the look down strat. It will take some time to be able to gauge the right angle without looking, and is one of the hardest parts of the run. This can take a week or 2 to get to grips with. Setting a line too far right will result in having to turn too hard to get to the door, losing time, and too far left will mean you aren't opening the door as quickly as possible. Once in the door, you do not want to be going too wide on your line to the key, but you also don't want to be too close to the wall either. You should err on the side of turning too sharply rather than too wide. When you turn too sharply, you receive instant feedback in the form of bonks, whereas it's possible to be turning too wide and not realize it. An optimal key approach is about 4.03. Key leave is the split from going in past this wall to going out past this wall, so basically consists of your turn to the key your key pickup, and your turn after the pickup. To get an ideal key leave, you don't want to be aiming exactly for the key. You roughly want to be aiming for the edge of the shadow next to the table. Then just before you hit the wall, change from left to right strafe, just brushing the key as you're twisting right in preparation to avoid bonking on this corner. An optimal key leave is about 5.11. The past hut split goes from getting past this inner corner to getting past the back corner of the hut, so it measures how clean your turn out of the hut was, how good the hut boost was, and how well you rode the boost around the corner. As mentioned, you want to be twisting right in preparation to avoid bonking on this corner. Then you want to crank your stick hard left as tightly as possible to avoid bonking on the door. If you did it right, you should have avoided hitting either the wall or the door on your way out. It's quite easy to lose time on the hut boost if you're not prepared for it. This tends to happen more when your huts aren't consistent, so you can end up being surprised by catching a good boost. But with some experience, you should be snapping left as early as possible and setting a good line to the corner on your way past the hut. As mentioned, you'll be cranking the stick hard left to avoid bonking on the door. However, this can lead to overturning, meaning the boost ends up sending you into the wall. A good visual cue for when to stop turning is when the edge of your screen touches the edge of this scorch mark on the ground. An optimal past hut split is about 6.75. The corner split goes from the back corner of this hut to the back corner of this wall. It measures how well you set your line after the corner after the hut boost. Once past the first corner, you want to snap to the next line to the corner of this wall. An optimal corner is about 10.60. However, this split can be slightly erratic, giving and taking 0.1 for no discernible reason, likely due to variance in lag. Note that these splits are based on what Berg, JL and Sayonara have achieved, who all have 21. You don't need a corner split in the 10.6s for 22. Something in the 10.7 should be enough. However, these splits are useful in that you can compare your splits to the ideal and see which parts of your start are losing the most time. Once you feel confident that you can regularly crank out 10.7s and know what a 10.7 looks like, feel free to try out some real runs on kart. I personally waited till I got a 22 on practice run before switching, since this time is all skill and virtually no luck. However, if you're itching to get going, consistent 10.7s are enough of a foundation for 22 on kart. You can use this page as a troubleshooting page. If any of your splits are slow, you can consult the relevant section, and it will likely be due to one of these reasons. For the rest of the run, you want to be priming the next nade as soon as you get the hut boost, then play the rest of the level like Agent 23. 3 boosts down the runway plus drone boost. If you've made it this far, then it's time for the final challenge of the video. What could well be your first world record, Secret Agent 22. The good news is that just as a 10.7 start was good enough for Agent 22, 10.7 is good enough for a Secret Agent 22. The bad news is that just like with 23, we have one fewer boost to work with, since we're using one of the nades for the battery throw. This means you will almost certainly need a guard boost to push you over the edge for 22, which is unfortunately rare. This is the biggest change from Agent to Secret Agent. On Agent you can play very inconsistently, occasionally get a 10.7 and just get some good nade boosts and you're guaranteed 22. On Secret Agent you need to consistently be cranking out 10.7 starts, because otherwise chances are when that rare guard boost comes around, the run won't be fast enough and it will be a chance wasted. There is no new tech for Secret Agent 22, so I'll just commentate a run going over everything we've learned over the course of the tutorial. Use 2.x. Hold left strafe from the start of the cutscene. Cut the cinema after the text phase. Cut the second cinema immediately to pick up the nades. Be holding roughly up left on the first controller before and as you take control of Bond, so you set your line immediately to the corner. Switch to nades as you go around the corner to help avoid getting stuck. Avoid snagging on the sides of the slide. Start priming the hut nade halfway down the slide. Make sure you're in look down in preparation for the hut nade throw. Set your line to the left of the door as early as you can without grinding on the slide. As soon as you set your line, release the nade and start priming the guard kill nade. Open the door from the left. Turn right tightly but not flat against the wall. Once round the corner, release the guard kill nade and aim for the edge of the shadow by the table. Just before you hit the wall, snap into right strafe and twist right, just brushing the key and setting up to avoid the corner. Prepare to crank the stick left to get out. If you did it right, you will avoid bonking on the wall or the door. If you are quick enough, you'll catch the boost. Be prepared to ride the boost into the corner and set your line to the corner of the wall as quickly as possible. This should set you on a pretty good line to the back side of the wing. As soon as you get the boost, start priming the next nade. Use whatever method you need to time the nade boost. After 2 boosts, the drone will start firing. When this happens, hold Z and create a small gap between the tail of the plane and the edge of your screen if in wide. If in full, line up the tail of the plane with the edge of your screen. As soon as you've set the line, get into full lookup, but keep holding the stick even once in full lookup in order to throw the nade slightly behind bond. The drone will hit bond, releasing the nade. One thing you will want to do slightly differently from Secret Agent 23 is you want to flick back to the plane before coming out of lookup. This ensures you spend as little time as possible on a bad line, and means that when you do get the rare boost, it will be boosting you at a better angle towards the plane. Mash B when close to the activation radius of the plane. Hopefully you'll receive an extra guard boost before you get there.